Sweet Christmas, as Luke Cage would say. Luke Cage Gang War #1. Mayor Luke Cage is going to dish out his own version of vigilante justice and address this gang war as he only knows how. I'm really excited for this story to see the direction that they take it. I'm very pleased to say that a old Spider-Man villain that I know from the animated series is going to be pretty much the main antagonist in this Luke Cage miniseries, and his efforts are also going to affect and have already been affecting the rest of the gang war, as we saw when Tombstone was attacked by shotgun at his daughter's wedding. Tombstone, who is also like Luke Cage, bulletproof, although Luke Cage, I believe his skin is much more dense than Tombstone's, because as we'll see here, the bullets actually penetrated Tombstone's skin and he had to be hospitalized. Unlike Luke Cage, we'll see that, like this cover, the bullets kind of just bounce off, but these ones did a little bit more damage. Luke Cage Gang War #1. How is Luke Cage addressing the gang war, the rise in crime? Because remember, he's also the mayor of the city as well. So it's not exactly like he can just go put on his outfit again, his studs, and just go crack some skulls, because now he has a reputation and basically a job to uphold. So let's dive into Luke Cage Gang War #1 and see how things unfold. And here we see once again this gang war map, which is going to be synonymous with all of the gang war titles at the beginning of the book. We're going to see this cool layout of the 5 boroughs that are infested with this gang war and who currently owns those territories. We see Black Mariah, Ringmaster, Crime Master, Central Park the Owl. But of course, we see the Maja owning probably the largest territory. And surprisingly, to my surprise, at least, Hobgoblin owning the second largest, and maybe even the Enforcers. Tombstone, his part is being contested. His daughter, who is Beetle, is pretty much going to be taking over, and she's trying to unify Harlem, and I think so she's going to probably get rid of Black Mariah. But this is pretty cool. Shang-Chi and the 5 Weapons Society, they've even got a little bit of territory there, just so that they can have, a seat at the table, if you will. But this is very cool and very interesting. And I believe based on the book and the issue, we're going to see this map here change, different names added, because as the gang war continues, sides are taken. There's victors, there's losers, and territories are the prize. So we'll see how this map changes and shapes as the event goes on. And first on the agenda for Mayor Luke Cage is to hold a formal press conference in this big-ass mansion. There you see protesters outside, full news media coverage. Now, Luke Cage is very calculated and smart, but he's here to formally address the public, the New York public, and tell them about the rise in crime, as if they didn't know. Or maybe they didn't, right? It's New York. I don't know. But he specifically says that armed robbery and violent crimes have increased by a whopping 75%. Now that's that's a lot. That is a lot. He goes on to elaborate and makes a very interesting point that costumed gangs have been targeting banks and other financial related institutions, as well as tech companies, in this gang war, in the armed robbery and the violent crimes. Now, Luke Cage has said this is not only where it stopped, because as it's progressed, there have been civilian injuries in addition to the millions of dollars that were lost and stolen from these institutions. Now, Luke Cage is a pretty damn good politician, because he disclosed the problem in great detail, and then he kind of glazes over with a number of general solutions that the public in the room there, they all know aren't going to really solve the problem. Stacey Combs, basically, she asked him, do you really think that all these solutions, such as, increasing the staff of New York's finest, do you think they can take on costumed criminals? Emphasis on costumed criminals there. Luke Cage, again, damn good politician, goes in to say, he now reinforces and reiterates what he said earlier, basically saying, yes, these are the finest police in New York City. And then he gets interrupted by Robbie Robertson. Now, Robbie Robertson, for those of you who know, he is works at the Daily Bugle, and his son was actually the one to wed Kingpin's daughter. And his son is actually really good friends with Peter Parker, okay? I think he might have replaced Harry in Peter Parker's life. I don't know. But he basically calls Mayor Luke Cage's bluff, saying that you're doing all this, you're putting all of New York's finest and increasing, the police force and allowing them to work longer hours and buffering up their equipment and da-da-da-da-da, because you know that they're inadequate against these costumed criminals who have high-tech weaponry themselves. And you're kind of pushing this to kind of get the crowd to be like, well, the police aren't enough, the National Guard's not enough. We need the Anti-Vigilante Act to be reversed so that we can have our own costumed heroes take on these costumed criminals. Now, Luke Cage is back in his office after the press conference and reflecting on the day and his performance and feedback from the news reporters. And he's really meddling over what Robbie Robertson and J. Jonah Jameson said to him about you're really trying to push the police and New York's finest and security and everything like that. Basically, kind of to use them as sacrificial lambs, if you will, not to their untimely demise, but of course they get roughed up quite a bit, which would kind of force the hand of the general public and say, hey, look, we have no choice but to lift the Anti-Vigilante Act. And Luke Cage is just pondering over things, and he's kind of realizing that he can't do very much inside of his office, so he needs to hit the streets and get to the ground and see what's going on outside. But as with any political leader, he has, his detail, his security guards. So it's basically like even if he goes to take a piss, these guys are going to follow him. So he says, okay, sure, that's fine. He makes up some bullshit. He's going to go to the bathroom. And Luke Cage uses that opportunity to athletically, like a cat, just climb and jump down out of the window to get to the ground and see what's going on. Luke Cage has more internal dialogue, reflecting on the fact that it's tough to be an honest man in City Hall and that your opponents are going to use your virtue against you. Luke Cage lands in the alleys as he looks at the crowd. One of their signs even says, "We're not gonna take it." But Luke Cage goes on to reiterate, Harry is an understatement, right? And he basically he always preferred the alleyways because he finds truth in them despite their darkness. So Luke Cage decides to grab a bite to eat with his old friend Danny Iron Fist. Well, he's currently not Iron Fist, which sucks, but he still has a black belt, as he mentions. So they sit down and have some soul food, some friendly banter, and they're just discussing the current events and current affairs. And Danny asks Luke, what's different from us and any other citizen that wants to make a difference? And Luke Cage is like, well, bulletproof skin and an iron. Oops, he stops himself. Danny's like, it's all cool, man. I still got a black belt. And Luke Cage, again, he's kind of decompressing right now and just realizing the weight of the office, the weight of City Hall, and says it's tough, to think straight with the weight of, a city on your back. And this is where now Danny sparks the idea for Luke Cage to form himself a little team indirectly. And he jokingly says, could use some heroes for hire, huh? Referring to their old glory days. But their heroic friendly reunion is cut short as one of the waitresses says to Mayor Cage that he might want to direct his attention towards the big screen, and to which he sees a news report saying that police in Midtown are engaged in a shootout. That's right, with some more of these costume criminals. So Luke Cage then makes a decision, and he says, I gotta get over there. And Danny basically tells him, take care. And the bill, he's like, yeah, it's okay. Next time it's on you. Luke Cage now, as mayor, he's going to go and grab himself a taxi and hash right over to Midtown to get involved in the action and see what he can do. And as the news report stated, the police are heavy in a shootout at a bank. You see those costume criminals right there. And he's like, until how long? Until they stop shooting. I don't know if they will. one of the police cars explodes. Mayor Luke Cage pulls up, and the two officers are pinned down behind a vehicle that has just been destroyed. He asks the officer on the scene to catch him up to speed. As the officer begins to tell Luke Cage a laundry list of what's going on and what's happened in the day thus far, it's a bank heist. We don't have the powers to stop him. Another police squadron car explodes, this time right in front of Luke Cage and the officer. And Luke Cage is kind of just like looking at it like it's, it's nothing. And you can hear that theme song playing in the background. You and me together be so happy. As this car just comes crashing at these two, ready to flatten them like a pancake. Smash! Except not today, because Mayor Luke Cage is no ordinary mayor. He is the bulletproof hero for hire, power man Luke Cage. And this time, he's not for hire. He's for kicking ass, starting with this police car. Look at the sheer power and force of Luke Cage as he is one shots this police car, which has got to be 3, 4, 5 tons. I don't know, probably like 2 tons. And these police officers are just like, holy shit. They're just like hiding behind him as all the debris and rubble just shatters around them. Luke Cage is like their shield. And then we see now Luke Cage standing defiant against the costume criminals, and he says no, and they open fire, and Luke Cage again stands in front of the two officers, shielding them, saving them so that they can clock out at the station and go home for the day and kiss their wife and their children. And Luke Cage now, this is very interesting, turning point in the story, people. The bullets, there's smoke coming up, and Luke Cage notices these aren't ordinary bullets. So that kind of, he goes into a rage and he rips off his shirt, and the police officer yells, Mayor Cage, I can't let you get involved, sir. And Luke's got this look on his face like, you punk ass motherfucker, you're going to let them get away. I could have grabbed them and smashed them, not killed them, but smashed them. And you're just going to let them just get away like that? And he goes, well, sir, the Anti-Vigilante Act, and you're a civilian. You can't get involved in. And my mom's got my dinner, and it's getting cold. Oh, okay, you son of a... You know what? Luke Cage calms down, regains his composure. The criminals get off with millions of dollars again. And Luke Cage basically says, ain't this a bitch? So basically, right? Luke Cage saved this guy's life, and he pulls a gun on him and tries to throw the book at him. So Luke Cage is like, all right, I'm done with this, and, I'm just going to regroup and re-strategize. So Luke Cage reconnects with the artist formerly known as Iron Fist later that evening, and he has one of the bullets that he thought penetrated his skin. Now, Danny's surprised. He's like, this little thing hurts you? And he's like, remember who you're talking to, Bulletproof Man here. And this is where Iron Fist, he's so useful, and he says to him, well, they're coated in adamantium alloy. And then Luke Cage is like, well, those guys were mercenaries at best. Where can they get that high-level tech? Where can they get adamantium from, right? That's not something that just regular mercs can get. And so basically, Danny's like, well, you know what? Now you know what it is, and now you just got to find out who supplied them. So Luke Cage goes to a top secret crime lab. No, he goes to a home, not just any home, the home of Hanson Holmes. That's right, Hanson Holmes. Whoever the hell this guy is, I have no idea, but apparently he is very knowledgeable because Luke Cage brings the adamantium alloyed crushed bullet to Mr. Holmes, and he is able to investigate as he gets his nerdy Dr. Boner on, looking at the adamantium alloy bullet. He admires the craftsmanship. Luke kind of snaps him out of it and says, I thought you'd appreciate it, but let's get down to business. Now, Hanson starts now going over who could possibly do this in his mind, process of elimination, the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, who would even have the diabolical mind to create something like this. And he finally he arrives at a verdict. None other than Alistair Smythe. That's right. Spider Slayer Alistair Smythe. And so now Luke Cage has a name to match to the product that nearly penetrated his skin. Now this is very interesting because maybe now this positions Alistair Smythe as a supplier, right? Which makes perfect sense. Alistair Smythe doesn't really give a shit about who wins the gang war or who takes what territory, but what a great lucrative opportunity for him to provide his munitions or his adamantium alloy bullets to basically all the gangs, right? He only really cares about the money. So now Luke Cage has got him now got to target Mr. Alistair Smythe. Now Luke Cage's next stop is his underground secret base. No, it's another fucking house. This is really cool. Luke Cage is just he's visiting like normal humble homes there in New York, the different towns and cities to actually aid him in this job of now targeting and basically hunting down Alistair Smythe. So the next stop is a elderly woman named Estelle. Some of you may know her. I do not. But she's apparently the one who designed Luke Cage's costumes for him in the past. And she goes to work with her humble sewing machine. Because now that Luke Cage has a target in mind, he now needs to stay discreet under the radar, which similarly and very, very comically, like Clark Kent's glasses just really completely hide his identity as Superman. Luke Cage has this kind of like quarter half face mask. The costume looks really cool. I'm not gonna lie, the costume looks sick. It's kind of like a black and gray tone there. The mask, he definitely does need that type of a mask, but his bald head is exposed as well as his goatee. He's still the same height and musculature. I don't know how anyone's not gonna be able to recognize him, but I guess we'll see how the costume's identity, how it hides his identity as we go along. Now, where does Luke Cage begin his search for Alistair Smythe's base of operations? Well, Hansen gave Luke Cage a hint that wherever Smythe is, there's going to be an unusually large amount of electrical wire running into whatever building that may be. So Luke Cage narrows it down, process of elimination, and he finds one. Now, it's just a hunch, but definitely worth taking a look. So Luke Cage goes onto the rooftop and he makes a distinction and says, well, you know, a law-abiding citizen would knock on a door, but that's not what I am right now. And as you see, he grabs the doorknob, pulls it off. Imagine the strength, like just with ease. And as he opens the door and enters the dark passageway, he says, I'm a vigilante. Luke Cage makes his way down the stairs into this warehouse to see exactly what looms inside, and he's met with the same costumed guards that were at the banks and the financial districts robbing throughout this whole entire gang war. And now Luke Cage basically has a decision to make. Is he going to become a victim, or is he going to take the fight right to him? The men open fire, pew, 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 pew. But even these lasers, was what they appear, are just bouncing off of Luke Cage's skin with his new costume as he looks cool, and he's running straight at the first guard there. And he's just taking these guys on. Punches, kicks, throws, seismic slams, smash. I change you boy's face. I gonna smash this guy. And Luke Cage is indeed smashing as he tosses the guy into the crowd of his friends. Now here come these Amazon drones lasering Luke Cage with the same lasers from these guns. But to no avail. Now, don't these lasers kind of look familiar to some of you, right? They aren't bullets, but they're just steady streams of constant lasers. Well, Luke Cage takes care of these as well, throwing a guy into them, knocking them off their course. Luke Cage is a man on a mission, and he will not be stopped. His bulletproof skin aids him as he can see the target, and he's getting closer. And at the moment, that target just so happens to be the nearby wall that Luke Cage is going to make a hole in with his body to give himself some breathing room and distance from his opponents. Kaboom! Crash! Kabang-a-bang-a-bang-a-bang-a-bang. Luke Cage crashes through that wall like it is nothing, lays the smackdown on it. Now, as they say, if you're surrounded by multiple enemies, you want to pin your back up against the wall so that no one can get behind you, which I think this is what Luke Cage's strategy was, or maybe he just thought it would be cool to just run his ass through a wall for dramatic effect. Either way, it works, and he's looking at them, they're looking at him, and they're not raising their weapons. So Luke Cage even then still declares, listen, I may not be able to take all of you, but I'm going to really fuck up some of you. And that's going to do some damage. Now, Luke Cage, before he can charge at him or the battle ensues again, these costume criminals kind of just like a military formation turn their attention from Luke Cage and begin to walk someplace else now. Now, this is funny, and Luke Cage notices that. So he begins to further investigate because he knows that something isn't right. And here we see the human fly, Alistair Smythe, with those tentacle arms behind his back and his 8-pack, reflecting to himself in his inner computer lab there, where he can see all of the monitors like he's Jigsaw just watching everyone in this game. But he's reflecting to himself about these costume criminals. Now, these costume criminals, we're going to learn, are not just that, but they are designs of Alistair Smythe. And they far exceed the Spider Slayers, according to his calculation. And he says he wishes that his father were there to see that what he's doing, his work now, he's bringing New York City to his knees, the biggest city, he says. And this task far exceeds anything he or his father desired. He knows more vigilantes or heroes will come because he knows that Spider-Man was just one of them. But he says that these new soldiers, or Spider Slayers soldiers, if you will, they will be ready to take them all on, and they will all taste the same fate as Luke Cage has. And we go to Hell's Kitchen, where we see Cloak and Dagger, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, a very nice entry. Cloak and Dagger battling some of Alistair Smythe's. These obviously must not be humans, as we're about to find out here, but they're battling some of these Spider Slayer tech soldiers, hybrid human soldiers, if you will. And we see Dagger there throwing her light daggers at him. Fa-cha, fa-cha, fa-cha. And Cloak's just so badass because he doesn't need to use any melee or weapons or hand-to-hand. He's literally his namesake and just opens up this cloak of darkness in his cape and like swallows, just consumes these fools right inside of this dark void. Like, where's his body? Like, I don't get it, but it's really cool. And you see like a teleport to another dimension. They're just engulfed and consumed by this blackness inside of Cloak's cloak, his cape. And him and Dagger have some dialogue there as they take out the remnants of these last guards. Now, Luke Cage decides to join the fight with Cloak and Dagger, and one of the guards is looking at Luke Cage there, and Luke Cage is basically now educating Cloak and Dagger that, hey, these guys may look and feel like the real thing, but they're not. And they open fire on Luke Cage. Luke Cage doesn't bother to dodge because he is fucking bulletproof. He charges at two of them that are firing at him, and he's basically telling Cloak and Dagger while he's fighting, which must be so cool if it were on a big screen. And he hops over on one wall like an agile athlete, like a T'Challa Black Panther, and jumps right behind two of them, grabs their heads, and smashes them together, exposing that there's no brain, no matter, no blood, no bone, but machine and copper and wire and bolts, the creations of that deformed, grotesque boxer brief wearing Alistair Smythe. Just look at this image here, just Luke Cage smashing their heads together. Two is better than one, but in this case, these two are done. I really like this, and you kind of have to imagine they had to make them robots, non-organic, right? So that they could do things like smash their heads open, because if they were real humans, I mean, I'm sure these guys would like knock them unconscious, but I guess it's kind of better that they're machines because they can get smashed and they can get basically incapacitated without there being like a death to a person. Now, this is where Luke Cage, looking at his handiwork, and Cloak and Dagger look at the rest of the non-organic soldiers, and they flee. They at least they're smart enough to know to run. And Luke Cage is basically talking to them, and they're having more dialogue. And he takes off his mask, the number one thing you don't do as a superhero. No. And here's what I was talking about. Like, they know who Luke Cage is, but they could not make out that this was Luke Cage. Because Dagger's like, Luke Cage. And then Cloak's like, I've never known you to wear a mask. Well, no shit, but you can still make out the bald 6'4" muscular dude who's bulletproof. Who else fits that profile? What, Dwayne the Rock Johnson? No, of course it's Luke Cage. But anyway, Luke Cage now recruits Cloak and Dagger to the cause with little effort. They're down. They've already been smashing these soldiers. Why not do it with Luke Cage? How fun would that be? And Luke Cage now just takes a moment to just kind of relax after a long day of politicking and kicking ass and just enjoy just whatever. Again, he's in the alleyway, right? He said earlier he enjoyed the alleys. There's truth in them. So he's kind of just having this moment, taking it all in. And he basically thanks Cloak and Dagger for joining his team. His phone rings right as Duty never sleeps. Dagger says, hey, your phone's ringing. And Luke Cage is like, I'm just going to enjoy this moment before we go any further. Moving right into issue number 2 of Luke Cage Gang War, we see Luke Cage has recruited Cloak, Dagger, his old partner Iron Fist, who's without an Iron Fist, so he's just iron. But he needs one more person. Who better than the woman he lays next to at night? That's right, the superhuman strong Jessica Jones. And we are back at New York City Hall, and we see that Luke Cage is having dialogue with someone, some type of a mission briefing there you see in his office. He's got Danny's there and looks like some kind of high-ranking military officials as well as intelligence officials as well. Luke Cage trying to obviously get a wrap around this gang war, but primarily focusing on Alistair Smythe and these adamantium aluminum bullets. And basically now they have where he is and trying to shut this place down. So we learn that he's talking to your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who happens to be in Murray Hill, because while this is going on, Spider-Man and his little team are also extinguishing the fires of this gang war. Now, Spider-Man, Luke Cage is obviously going to trust Spider-Man more than this lieutenant guy here, this G.I. Joe, or whoever this guy is. And he basically brings more problems to the attention of Mayor Luke Cage. And Luke Cage is kind of, again, he's a good politician. And he's like, we'll just keep fighting the good fight. And you can tell this guy is just pissed off at that response. Look at the faces of these people. Look at that guy with the glasses, that nerdy guy. He's like, oh, man, I'm not going to get to analyze my data now. And then Luke Cage goes back with Dan. Basically extends the invite to him for his team that he already has Cloak and Dagger on. So although the cover of this book shows the completed team of Cloak, Dagger, Danny, and Jessica Jones, as of this time in the story, Luke Cage only has officially recruited Cloak and Dagger. And right now in his office, he's also brought Danny on board. And Danny asks, well, who else you looking to recruit? And we see on top of a building laying in a right hand or a left hand to one of those Alistair Smythe criminals there is none other than Luke Cage's wife, Jessica Jones. And she's on top of a building. She has superhuman abilities, although in some iterations her powers are not consistent, but in the comics they are. Jessica Jones, very headstrong, very confident, has a short temper, as some of you may know. This is my first real comic introduction to Jessica Jones. So I was very shocked to see her abilities in some of these panels, but it's very cool. So we see her here. She spots 2 more targets and she kaplams down with some kind of a martial arts like crouching tiger split kick, knocking both of these guards out at the same time. And then look at this right here, right? She says you brought the cavalry for little old me. Well, little old you can grab the door of an armored vehicle and just rip it off with one hand. So, yeah, the cavalry for you is necessary, sweet cheeks. And then as the door's ripped off there and she gets inside of the vehicle, she's surveillancing and seeing what's going on. And more guards are beginning to show up. But to her surprise, her husband, Luke Cage, shows up in his new attire. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier before about the identity, the costume. So if you remember to the last issue, right, Dagger didn't know that it was Luke Cage until he removed that mask off of his face. But Jessica Jones, with him in full costume, knows that that's him. Now, granted, okay, we know that Jessica Jones she knows every inch of Luke Cage's body, as we're going to see her pretty much treat him like a piece of meat and kind of sexualize him here in the next few panels, but in kind of a cool way while he's kicking these guards' ass. So Jessica Jones gives Luke Cage her seal of approval as she likes the way it contours his chest and fits his ass and his arms and shoulders and whatnot. So she gives it the seal of approval. And to put the icing on the cake here, Luke Cage again grabs two of these metallic robotic spider slayer tech guards and just crushes them together above his head in a triumphant stance. Alpha male, totally right there in front of his wife. You know Luke Cage is getting some later tonight. And she's impressed. So she says, so although I thought we agreed to let me dress you, finally she says, here, I approve. And Luke Cage, in similar kind of fashion, he goes, hey, as long as you're happy, baby, I'm good with that. So now that the calm from the storm is over and the guards have been neutralized, Jessica Jones is, like everyone else, surprised that these were robots and not real men. And then Luke Cage informs her that these are the creations of Alistair Smythe, the one that was in charge of the Spider Slayers. And then she gets back to the costume and says, well, what's with the getup? He tells her about the Anti-Vigilante Act that's still intact and that he has to wear a mask and things to keep a low profile. Here we return to Alistair Smythe's lair, his base of operations, and as he's looking at these guards in their skeletal form before they are suited to look like real human criminals, and he is just saying that he's upset, he's mad because Luke Cage, they're destroying his creations, but he says that he has even more that he's going to dispatch into this town of New York because, again, he wants to bring New York to its knees. And so he's finally now ready to put his full attention to Luke Cage. And here we see now more of his guards at Rikers Island in yet another shootout with NYPD because they got a tip that Rikers Island was going to get hit to release all of the inmates. So basically the cops, again, they're down and out. Their vehicles are getting exploded, blown up. There's, guards. I think this is one of the guards that was in Luke Cage's office earlier. And basically, they're just holding on for dear life, trying to hope for a miracle. And out of nowhere, that miracle shows up in the form of a Walmart quilted blanket. No, that is Cloak, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Dagger, and Danny, the artist formerly known as Iron Fist. And one of the officers says, you know what, that sounds like vigilantes. So now that Luke Cage and crew are here on the scene, they're about to issue out some vigilante justice like no other. And up first is Cloak and Dagger as Luke Cage gives them instructions to flank and they take on the guards right there as you see. Danny may not have the Iron Fist, but he still has a foot and a nice Converse sneaker. Now that Jessica Jones knows these aren't humans, she ain't holding back and she rips right through him with a one-shot punch. The cops stand in amaze as they've been spending all night trying to get rid of these things, and they didn't even know that they were robots, and Luke Cage and crew come and clean up in just a mere matter of 2 minutes flat. And again, we see this bullshit here of, abiding by the law, and the guard draws his weapon on Luke Cage, which is just absolutely ridiculous because he's bulletproof, and there's no way that they're going to be able to stop him. And basically, Luke Cage tells the officer that, and they go on about their merry way. Now the 5 heroes are in front of Smythe's lab, the entrance, and Luke Cage is trying to come up with some kind of strategy to enter stealthily, and his wife Jessica Jones, the hothead, says, well, let's just barge in there aggressively as she punches the door down. And to their surprise, of course, they are met by like 30 of these Smythe Spider Slayer guards, and Luke Cage then reiterates, well, this is exactly why I said we should stealthily sneak in. Jessica Jones replies, oh, stop thinking like a politician. And Luke Cage fires back, oh, yeah? Can a politician do this? And he basically punches one of those guards down. And the rest of the team there dismantle the guards as they make their way through deep into the lair of Smythe's lab. As they get past that first round of guards, Luke Cage instructs Danny to go upstairs and find Smythe's lab. Jessica Jones makes a jab and says, you two make a nice couple or something like that. And he's like, are you asking me for a divorce? Jessica Jones fires back, divorce? I'm not the one in an emotional affair, as she is confronted with more of these Smythe guards, and she loves the thrill of the fight. She doesn't really care because, again, of her superhuman abilities. And then Cloak and Dagger throw their 2 cents in, and he's like, Jessica Jones says she loves poking the bear, and Dagger says she's going to have to try that sometimes, as we see Cloak just absorb more of these guards into the spawn voided black darkness. Then we see Danny, the one tasked with the main important thing of finding Smythe, make his way up the stairs into the depths of Smythe's lab. And while he's doing it with his nice Converse there, he triggers one of these alarms, which sets off a series of intricately placed lasers. Now, this probably would disintegrate any normal man, but Danny's no ordinary man. He still has the reflexes and the abilities, even though he doesn't have the power of the Iron Fist. As we see here, he nearly impossibly and perfectly just places every one of his limbs and orients his body so that he doesn't get him removed like a lightsaber. And afterwards, you see he's very pleased as he runs his way past this booby trap, if you will. And then, of course, in dramatic effect, he's going to just kick Smythe's door down. I mean, that's very impressive to kick a door off the hinges. And Smythe is expecting him, and we see even more Smythe spider guards. It's like, geez, like, what is there, like a breeding factory for these dudes? And Danny, again, he must be like that Taekwondo guy from Tekken, because he loves to use his feet, which is smart because these guys are robots. If he tries to punch him with his hands, no Iron Fist, might mess himself up. So he completely one-shot decapitates one of these robots. But then Smythe, I'm thinking, I don't know if Smythe shoots him with a laser or one of those guards does. But anyway, that's enough to incapacitate Danny, and he's down. Meanwhile, we go back to Luke Cage and the rest of the crew as they've taken out the guards, and Luke Cage becomes suspicious as he says, hey, this shouldn't have taken Danny this long. He should already be back. We should have news on where Smythe is. So the team now begins to go and search for Danny, and they do find him right below Smythe's feet. Now, Alistair Smythe, he's just a pissed off, angry guy because all he can wear are boxer briefs. Okay, he's got these sharp, weird things on his calves and these tentacle Doc Ock weird things out of his back. He can't wear shirts, can't put socks on, or jeans. He's gonna rip them. So all he can wear are boxer briefs. So no wonder he just makes these diabolical like weapons of I wouldn't say mass destruction, but we'll say like mild destruction to unleash on New York City because he's just mad he can't just wear regular clothes. And now we see Cloak seemingly getting fed up, and he just screams, let's end this. And he widens his cloak even more to absorb even more of these guards, all the guards that were in that room, and it absorbs them into his cloaked dark void. And as we see here, one by one, like 4th of July, they're just exploding, going off like fireworks. All to Luke Cage's very, very surprised, and he is pleased, and he says, I knew there was a reason why I recruited you. As Cloak says, it is done. So now they've got the distractions out of the way, and they can now focus all their attention on the man of the hour, the target, Alistair Smythe. And basically, Dagger now, they can also focus on Danny, as that's what Dagger does. She says he needs medical attention stat. And Jessica Jones, of course, is like, you know what? This will be over soon. Now, Alistair Smythe objects to Jessica Jones, saying this won't be all over soon. But Luke Cage goes to lay in to try to take the moral high ground and tell Smythe that he is pissed off about cats like him who have all the resources in the world, and that they would so use those resources against New York City when it's most vulnerable. Now, as you see here, Danny comes to because he hears some bzz, 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 and he is able to utter, what's that? Smythe takes out some kind of detonator, it appears, to blow up the lab. So Jessica Jones was right that it wasn't going to all be over soon, but not because they were going to take out Smythe. Now, what's very interesting and kind of comical here is you see Jessica Jones is the one who picks up Danny, picks up Iron Fist, and hoists him like a child and runs out. I mean, I was really impressed with her abilities in this issue, which is crazy. Like, you would think Luke Cage would have grabbed Danny and slung him over his shoulder. But no, it was his wife, and she was the one who was cracking the jokes about him all along too. But I mean, this shows that she really does care about him. He was down, and she had to be the one to take initiative and get him out. After the battle with Smythe and the explosion of his lab, we see Mayor Luke Cage back at his office just reflecting on the day and his life, saying that when he was younger, he always thought that Harlem was New York, and when he got older, dealing with street life, and he never saw himself working as a mayor within the system. But basically, this is where he is, and at least he basically took Smythe down, or did he? He hears a rumbling outside and feels things in his office begin to move. And he's like, an earthquake in New York? No way. And he looks outside of his window, and it appears to be some kind of sentinel looking being. And it's Smythe speaking through this being, obviously, through some kind of Bluetooth or something. And Smythe says something very, very interesting. He says, I told you the game wasn't over. And he basically says, you want to know how I concluded that it was you were the hero, in quotes, who ruined my plans. And then we go to the next panel and we see three of these like Smythe like sentinels, we're going to go ahead and call them. Just a note, to have Alistair Smythe, if you're a supervillain in the Marvel universe, to have Alistair Smythe on your payroll or in, a part of your cabal is seemingly priceless, because this guy right here seems to have a brain, a mastermind, and the resources to create. Now we see these massive weapons and to use them. But basically, he says that the person who gave Luke Cage up to Smythe was the one whom he has lost, who does not respect Luke Cage anymore. So they've lost respect for Luke Cage. Whoever this person is, they and Luke Cage have lost respect. So maybe now in issue number 3, we're going to get to see who is this individual that basically told Smythe about Luke Cage, and he was the one who foiled his plans. That has been the conclusion of the first 2 issues of Luke Cage Gang War. Now you guys are all caught up. We basically covered all the main points of the Gang War, with the exception of Miles Morales' Spider-Man on this channel. And I might do that, I might not. I'm not sure. We'll see how that story goes. But thank you guys if you've got this far. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, this has been Trademark Comics, and I am out.